Coming up on Push to Talk. Titanfall is on hold. Fortnite crunches in the background to keep up with the demands of content generation. Persona 5 Scrambled disappoints myself and many others. There's some new Death Stranding news on the way. And how do we get hyped for games? All this and more on today's show.
This is Push to Talk, episode 21, recorded Sunday, April 28th, 2019. This episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/push-to-talk and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Then just download a title for free and start listening. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Jan, your host. Alongside with me are Bill and Joe. How's it going this week, guys? How's it going, Bill?
It's going well. You know me. Weeks blend together, and I never know how it's going. So I guess I can't answer that, but I think it's good.
The only way you know that it's time for the podcast is that it's the weekend, and I tell you that it's time, right?
Yes, and then it's like, oh, okay, now I have to go to work tomorrow. Okay, I get that. And yeah, it really does blend together. So I have no complaints. How's that?
That's pretty good. What about you, Joe? Do you have a better handle on like what day of the week it is and all that?
Yeah.
Basic human necessities.
I was going to say, I think I'm having at least the same level of contentedness as Bill, but I definitely have a better grasp of time and space than Bill does.
So you're also sad that tomorrow is Monday and the start of another work week, right?
It's not my favorite day of the week, Sunday night.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we release this podcast every Tuesday. You're already almost halfway through the week. Mm-hmm. And I guess we will help you get to the middle of the week and then onwards from there. I just wanted to mention, and I keep forgetting this in other episodes, that you can catch us on social media on Twitter at push2talkfm and online as well, www.pushtotalk.fm. All right, having said all that, let's talk a little bit about some news stories from the past week. Bill, why don't you get us started?
All right, so I have chose a news story that's not exactly a big story, although I think maybe it's big because people blow it out of proportion. Basically, Kojima is saying that we might see more, we might see more Death Stranding in the near future. And of course, as to be expected, we know nearly nothing about this game. It's been in development for 2 years, maybe? Something like that? Which isn't particularly long, but okay. Maybe even longer than that, but it's still not long. And yeah, he says absolutely nothing really, except I think that it's an open world action game and that we might see more of it soon, and the internet just flips out. Because...
Which is funny.
It's not funny, it's silly. Maybe silly is funny, but it's just weird to me, like why? A trailer comes out for this thing, and I think one came out last year at some point, and of course everyone...
E3.
Yeah, everybody's got to break it down, and everybody's got to look into it, and what does this mean, and what does that mean, and what's it about? Nobody knows what it's about. I'd be shocked if Kojima knows what it's about, to be honest with you. And that's not to say I don't think it'll be a good game, but I do not understand why everybody freaks out every time this guy, walks 5 feet forward. I don't get it. I've played other Kojima games, and I just don't see that godlike status that he has been assigned in everything he does. Am I missing something?
Well, you may have the wrong audience, because I think perhaps we agree with you, the three of us.
Oh,
but
well,
I will pledge ignorance on this one, because I understand that there seems to be a lot of hype around what he does, and I also understand the hype around Death Stranding to some degree. It features some big name Hollywood actors, right? And the stuff that we have seen looks really cool, but it also looks like it could just be an animated movie. I mean, we haven't seen anything that's anywhere close to gameplay or any idea of what the game is about or even what kind of game it is. But I guess if you want to build hype in some way, this is kind of the way that it can be done. Big name actors, big name behind the development of the game. and as little information as possible, but tons of teasing.
Sure.
Sure, but yeah, I guess. I mean, I will agree that I'm probably more excited to see Norman Reedus' performance in that than anything right now. Which again, it could be an amazing game, but I remember the hype that came with Metal Gear, the last Metal Gear. What was it? Phantom Pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I played it, and I'm like, yeah, it's good, but it is not like I have played a dozen better games since then. Like, it's not that good. And I've played other Metal Gears in the past, going back to different consoles and generations, and I don't see it. I don't see why we do this. And maybe this is the game that will change my mind, but I almost feel, and I guess this is why I chose this story, I almost feel like I'm the person who needs the evidence, right? Firsthand. Whereas most people just want to be a part of it. So when they see a handful of people freaking out over Kojima, that's the cool thing to do when they start freaking out over Kojima, because that's what people do. Whereas I'm just standing there, instead of joining them in mindlessly going, I don't understand. And everyone's like, but it's Kojima. Right. I know his name, but I don't understand why we're at this level. And maybe I'm just missing something, but I need to see firsthand. I have to have a firsthand experience that drives that sort of hype, not something that comes secondhand because of other people.
What I find interesting is that just before we started recording this, when you brought this up that you wanted to talk about this, I rewatched a little bit of the E3 2018 trailer of Death Stranding. And, you know, all the beautifulness aside, at the end of it, you know how YouTube recommends other videos that are related to watch? Well, one of them just says Death Stranding explained, ? And I feel like that's the perfect sort of type of content that's out there right now, because, you know, nobody really knows.
Right.
But I mean,
we're just
isn't it
assuming?
Yeah, and isn't it a giving that we're going to find out more? We're coming up on E3. Now, Kojima said that it would be in the next month or so, which is a little bit before E3. We're about a month and a half to 2 months away from E3. But, of course, we're going to see more. It's been almost a year.
I don't think Sony's going to be at E3, so I don't think it'll be there. It'll be something around there. Unless I'm mistaken, but I believe they're not
you're
going.
right.
He's probably going to be at
So,
Jeff Keighley's
it'll be something.
living room.
Yeah, I know, but it's just odd to me. We don't know anything about the game except, you know, the things that we kind of believe based on, you know, some very vague trailers that don't really mean anything. And yeah, this game is probably, like, I would put Cyberpunk at the head of the hype train right now.
Yeah.
And then this second. And I don't understand, because Cyberpunk, we watched like an hour of actual gameplay. In this, we watched a couple trailers that are definitely not an hour, I don't think.
It's just different though. And I guess I'm gonna be the guy that's defending the hype, but it's not because I personally feel it. It's just I've always viewed it as being like, it's like a Coen Brothers fandom where it's always this kind of like surreal version of the real world that Kojima presents, right? It's like, Metal Gear Solid was like this spy ops thing, but then, it's like fantasy sci-fi also in the background. And I think if you're into sci-fi and you're into weird cinema and you're into like dissecting things, like there's just a certain person that kind of falls for that, for what he does,
I agree. But I still think that the majority of the people falling for it are only falling for the trend. They're not falling. Like, I think that there's a group of people out there that generally like exactly what you're talking about, and he could do anything, and they legitimately are hyped because they loved everything he's done before. And then I think there's a huge group, probably 90% of people, who are just following the crowd.
Yeah, I could say that about almost anything, though. But I agree with you.
Yeah, it's just, for some reason, this one's been catching my attention for like 2 years, basically. Because I guess I see it in certain cases. Like, I understand why the crowd follows Fortnite, for example, but I mean, I don't understand why they follow Kojima, I guess. Maybe I will learn this over the next however long it takes for this game to come out.
It's almost like a weird sense of humor is like almost the best analogy I could think of, where it's like, yeah, it's funny. Like the original Point Break with Keanu Reeves. It's like funny if you're thinking about it in that way. It's this like background noise funny. And in that same sort of way, Kojima's games are like, in this background noise, in this subtle way, they're different, let's say, just to put it simply. And I think that's enough for him to just garner the kind of fandom he's had, where he's just so unique, good or bad, confusing or not, whether it's still all deliberate or not deliberate. We could definitely debate that, but it's unique, objectively unique, to the point where, yeah, it's he's got his posse that's following him. So,
and there's always a chance that I, one, don't know what good acting or video games are. That's a very real possibility. And two, I may play this game and absolutely love it. And I hope I do. I hope it's one of the best games I've ever played. I'm not there yet. Like, nothing has kind of proved to me that I should be on that level.
It may also just entirely not be your type of game. I mean, there's lots of highly touted, critically acclaimed games that I don't enjoy because they're just not my type of genre or my type of theme. It's all out there. But the other thing that I think is a little interesting about Kojima is that his name as an individual is still so valued and respected and hyped. And that, I feel like that's going away more and more. Like, you used to think back years ago, you'd have people like Sid Meier's and others. Now, with all the big studios, it's more like Ubisoft this, Respawn that, Epic Games that. You know, it's more like the group, the companies, as opposed to individual people. Like, I couldn't tell you. Actually, I could tell you who was the lead on Titanfall. But, you know, there's a lot of games where you no longer really know who that one person is that is identified with a certain franchise. So that's kind of rare, and there's definitely a bit of a cult following there.
Yeah.
Okay. I am satisfied that we have not made any progress except to say that it's weird.
I can guarantee you that in about a month or so, we will be talking about Death Stranding when we hear more.
Yep.
So there is that.
Yeah, there's that. We'll see. Maybe, and you know what? Maybe that'll change my mind. We'll see. I have an open mind, but again, end of the day, I haven't seen the evidence to really sell me on the hype yet. So hopefully that shows up soon.
And we'll talk a little bit later on in the show in our hashtag Push to Talk segment about how people get hyped for games. We'll chat a little bit about that a little bit later on. But now moving on, Joe, you had a story that you had your eyes on this past week. Why don't you tell us about it?
I would be happy to. I was going to mention the reveal of Persona 5 Royal, which is a PS4 and a Switch game. And the interesting angle on this reveal is that weeks and months leading up to this reveal, there was some teasing, I don't think leak, but deliberate teasing, if I remember, from the publisher Atlas, indicating that a title entitled Persona 5S was coming to the Switch. So I understand that at the very least, Bill, I don't know where you stand, Jan. There isn't a deep understanding of the Persona history amongst us, but I will briefly describe. Persona is a offshoot series of the Shin Megami Tensei dungeon crawling RPG series developed by Atlas. And Persona is an really interesting, and very, very unique franchise in that it's a RPG, turn-based RPG like you've seen before, except for the fact that it takes place on a schedule. And more specifically, each game in the series takes place on a high schooler's calendar schedule. So you live the protagonist's life a day at a time, go to school, and when you come back from school, typically that's when the battle portion of your day takes place. So I could go on and on about it, but that's really the main conceit and the hook of the franchise. That's kind of how they set themselves apart. And it's, for the most part, I've played to some degree now 3 of the 5 games. And first of all, it's really well done. It's really highly celebrated series. It is a bit of a niche thing. Anything Japanese is going to be niche as opposed to mainstream, I guess. But at any rate, this tease for Persona 5S, which was the teased name, not the official name, was pretty widely accepted as being the Switch port. And for fans of the series, many of us, myself included, played their first Persona game on the Vita when the Vita first released. With it came Persona 4 Golden, which was a re-release and an upgrade of Persona 4, which was originally on the PS2. And that was many people's first experience with the series. And I know I'm not the only person out there who was like, oh my God, what is this thing? It's incredible. And then we became hooked. Persona 5 came out 2 years ago now. Awesome, awesome game. And now we all think that it's coming to the Switch, the ultimate JRPG machine, period. Take it on the go, do all your turn-based battles on the go. It really would be a match made in heaven. So we see Persona 5S, and we're like, this is it. This is going to be the Persona 5 Extra Edition, just like Persona 4 Golden was on the Vita, right? Anyway, long-winded story to say, we finally got the official reveal that this is going to be a Musou game, which is to say it's going to be like Orochi Warriors, or we all know those games, like Hyrule Warriors, the hack and slash, go into hordes and hordes of enemies and rack up as many combos as you can. I don't have any interest in that personally. I'm not coming down on that kind of game. If you're into it, so be it. It's all good. But
it's very different, right?
It's so different to the point where if you look at a Hyrule Warriors, you are making an offshoot game of an action game, right? You're in some ways appealing to the same audience, in some ways. I like Zelda though, and I don't like Musou games, so I suppose there isn't like 100% crossover love there. But when you take a JRPG, especially one that you've mismarketed to be, you're leaking and teasing, right? And you're mismarketing because everybody was so sure. It wasn't like even a maybe. It was like, oh, sick, they're bringing Persona 5 to the Switch, right? So this reveal really fell flat. Not only for me, but I'm hearing, on Reddit and Twitter that it's just a shame that they sort of teased it the way they did, because it's this reveal is being met with disappointment as opposed to hype and pre-orders, right? So
how do you? Sorry, go ahead, John.
I was going to say it's interesting because a port to the Switch might have been essentially the same game as Persona 5, maybe enhanced and obviously on a mobile device instead of just on a sitting at home. But so I guess on the one hand, that is not entirely new, but really welcomed, and everybody seemed to have been excited about that. And now you get something like completely off in a different direction, which seems so strange. Like, I'm sure it would have sold really well if it had just been Persona 5 for the Switch.
Sure. And I believe also, and shame on me for not having an official info for you, but I believe they did reveal the Persona 4 Golden equivalent of Persona 5 in the past couple weeks, meaning that there is a new edition of the game, which is tradition now. They do this. They release the game. 2 years later, they add some content and they rebundle the game, right? So I believe they are doing that. However, it's not coming to the Switch. So it's more like it's more insult to injury, as they say.
So I guess my question is, and it could be, is this something that is going to anger enough people that there'll be a backlash they have to respond to? And if that's the case, how do they recover? Or if they just don't care, how do you recover?
Well, my experience with this side of gaming is that the JRPG crowd is not the young tween Fortnite crowd. Most people that are into this genre are now adults like myself, because we grew up on Final Fantasy, which is really now kind of like a relic as far as genres go. So it tends, I think, what I see is not, what I'm seeing on Reddit, for example, I alluded to that. What I'm seeing isn't like childish backlash. It's just disappointment. Like, shoot, why did they pitch it this way? We all thought it was going to be the real game, So I don't think there's any permanent damage done, and if they come back at E3 and say, it turns out Persona 5, whatever the code name is coming to Switch, it would be like, oh, perfect. Thank God. Yeah, that's great. So.
Okay. I'm trying to sort of make an equivalent comparison in my mind to better understand your pain.
Well, there's no real pain on my, if anything, I want to see the series thrive. I like it. But I've played it already. It's available for PS4 in the States. So I've had my time with it, but because it is niche and it is, it's not a mainstream franchise by any means, any expansion of the series is something I'm rooting for. So I was annoyed from that perspective to see that they didn't bring the port over.
Okay, I get you. I would have been pretty upset though. Personally, I don't take things well, so something like that, like I like maybe 7 games in the entire world. So when one of those franchises does something that I'm not happy about, it tends to ruin like 2 years of my time. So
Jeez.
I don't take it well at all. So
Well,
I'm trying to figure out what Destiny 3 could be like to make you really pissed off. And there's so many options.
Yeah. No, it's in the bag, man. It's in the bag. I'm gonna be pissed. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's weird because I was totally expecting you to be like, man, I'm really upset. This really sucks. Like, I had a lot of eggs in this basket, and you're just like, yeah, it's a bummer, but whatever. And I'm like, that is not how I would have handled that at all.
Oh, well, that's just adulthood speaking. I have, car payments to worry about. I can't be stressing out about Persona 5.
So here's the question: is it still something you'll play, or is it just too different that it's not of interest?
Oh, definitely won't play it. And that's really, if I had to TLDR everything I just said, is that I don't think I'm alone in that. It's just not appealing whatsoever.
I guess it would be an interesting experiment for that developer, for Atlas, to see if it's, if it was worthwhile, like if they're branching out into a different genre sort of will help them, or if it's just going to be one of those things that a couple of years down the road they'll be like, oh, that was a mistake. We should have just done what everybody was expecting.
Yeah.
This would be like Bungie saying, surprise, we're making Anthem 2, and I'd be like, yeah, no, okay, forget it. I'm out.
Well, I think the most recent example in a game that you and I are more familiar with would have been Blizzard's announcement last year when they talked about, everybody was expecting some Diablo news, and then they're like, oh yeah, it's a mobile game. And,
Yeah.
people were screaming bloody murder, which was a little silly, but there's certainly a lot of expectations these days and a lot of unhappiness, rightfully or wrongfully, when they don't get to what,
the three of us, to some degree, maybe myself the most, work in a marketing field to some extent, right? Like, some of my workday is spent thinking about how we market something. So it's always interesting for me to see something like this and like, how did this get out of the conference room? Like, it can't be so, like, the thing that you're about to leak a little bit on purpose, the teasing, it can't be so vague that someone's going to think that it's the Persona 5 port on the Switch. You're gonna upset so many people. So
yeah, no, I definitely, I agree. I've had that same thought a few times about a few different things.
Yeah.
I could see, I don't know how that happens. Like, it always bothers me when you see sort of like a PR snafu like that. And if it's obvious to me, how did nobody throw stupid out the window in that meeting?
Yeah, I mean, and what I'll also say is I've been in meetings where I feel that I've brought something up or someone else has brought something up, and another party in the room is like, nah, you're overthinking it, right? And it turns out it wasn't being overthought,
Right.
So I can see how things get there. It's just, these kind of stories aren't that uncommon. Like, there's a lot of PR screw ups in the video game industry pretty often. So,
and a lot of it has to do with indie devs not having PR firms, or at least in the case of No Man's Sky originally. But
oh, sure.
I guess here's another way to think of it, though. A game like this has been in development for a while, right? Like, we know it takes years to make these games. So imagine investing in a project, like both of you. Imagine investing in one project for 2 years, and then you finally reveal it to the public, and they go, that's crap. Like, that has to be a hard shot to take.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we're not talking about like a week.
No,
we mean that there's people doing this every day and for hours a day, overtime, for years. And then they reveal it in a trailer or whatever over the course of a couple minutes, and it's just like that balloon gets popped instantly.
And that's why it's always, and I think this is a mature, healthy perspective to take on these things, is that it's always wise to remember that nobody set out to disappoint you. Like, they're building something that they believe in, whoever they are, whatever they're building, but everybody that's building something is usually wanting to do it, and they have some goal in mind, and they're hoping that everybody will like it. And, it's just like, no one's building this to disappoint what you were expecting. So,
Yeah, for sure. And I think Joe has advanced levels of I'm over it going on. Because something like this, if I was invested in the franchise, it would really bother me. I wouldn't put that out there to the internet because I don't believe in that. So I wouldn't be like going after developers or tweeting the official account or going on Reddit and being angry or anything like that. I would just tell you on Discord.
Should I not have said it on the podcast then?
Sorry?
Should I not have said this on the podcast, you're saying?
No. That's fine.
No. I'm just saying, like, I definitely agree with what Jan says, that, you know, that's important to keep in mind. Like, nobody set out to disappoint you, but I also would take it a step further and, like, you just don't have a right to be angry. Like, this is not you.
No, but what I also think is important, and this has happened time and time again, you mentioned No Man's Sky. It's really important for companies to set expectations properly in some way. Yeah, and exactly. It sounds like there was a little bit of a misjudgment of their teasing, especially calling it Persona 5S. You know, I mean, I could call it Persona 5R, and maybe it would have been slightly less linked to the Switch. Mm-hmm. Anything, really. But what you mentioned actually kind of relates into the two stories I wanted to talk about, and we can kind of squish them together, and because they are related. So one of them was that Epic Games has sort of talked about, or Polygon has interviewed several contract workers at Epic Games about how Fortnite's success has actually led to a lot of crunch. And of course, we heard a lot about that with BioWare recently and Anthem, and I don't want to rehash all of that because we spent plenty of time talking about it. But anybody that's been paying even the slightest bit of attention to Fortnite, and I know, Bill, you have, because you see it come through the news on Check News and stuff on a daily basis, is there is new stuff every day. There's new weekly challenges. The world's changing. There's new skins. It's constant updates. So it's not really surprising that there is some kind of crunch going on there. And obviously, the game's super successful. But part of the reason they are so successful is this constant stream of updates. And in relation to that, Apex Legends developer Respawn had mentioned that they are also trying to focus on continuous updates for Apex Legends, and because of that, Titanfall plans may be pushed back a little bit, which is an interesting discussion because Titanfall 3 has never really been officially announced. I think there's no doubt that there's probably some thought been given to the next Titanfall game. And in the meantime, Respawn is also working on Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is done by a different team. And there's a lot going on. There's probably a lot of balls up in the air at both of these developers. But is anybody really surprised that people are working a lot of long hours at Epic Games to get Fortnite to where it is now?
No. And it's not going to get better. It's never going to get better. And when I say never, I mean for the immediate future that we can see. Because it's almost hypocritical for me to talk and say I don't like the crunch, because I don't like the crunch when it's forced on other people, but I use the crunch to get ahead personally and have historically. So I outworked people for low pay originally, and put in some cases 17, 18 hours a day in order to show a value for myself. So this crunch that we're seeing, we look at it and we say, well, this is bad. And it's like, okay, well, it's bad. Do you know what happens when you don't have the crunch? And I'm just kind of assuming here, I might be completely wrong. Destiny 2, right? How often are we like, well, this isn't happening fast enough. Well, they're not doing this fast enough. They're not adding enough content to the game. Maybe they're not overworking their people. Maybe that's why that's happening. Maybe this is what it really looks like. And then Fortnite, man, oh my. I didn't know anything about the crunch, but I hooked up a Slack channel to tweet, basically to update every time the Fortnite account tweets. And you're not kidding. Every single day, multiple times a day, there is new content in that game. Every day. I can't keep up with it. You could hire one writer to write nothing but Fortnite all day, every day, and they would be busy. And that's not an exaggeration.
Mm-hmm. And of course, this all kind of came from Respawn saying at one point that, yes, Apex Legends is going to have continuous updates, but it's not going to be at the expense of making their employees do crunch. Which, again, even at that level, like you mentioned, it's competitive between individual employees, right? If somebody's willing to work extra hours and you're not, maybe it puts you at a disadvantage. But even competitively across games, if people are working 70 hours a week on Fortnite and Respawn is having their dev team work 40 hours a week on Apex Legends, does that put Apex Legends at a disadvantage?
No, of course. And it already is.
Yeah.
It's already fallen back to like 4th or 5th on Twitch for, average viewership compared to Fortnite, which has regained its dominance. And it's just unfortunate. It's the way it is. There's always somebody out there that's willing to put themselves through things that they shouldn't put themselves through. And as a boss or a manager, you're going to pick the person that's going to work harder and longer,
Can I throw out a question? I suppose it's just a question. With the funds that Epic has amassed because of Fortnite, they could, and I'm by no means suggesting this is easy or just like snap your fingers and you can make this happen. They could staff a day-night cycle of development. It's financially possible. There's a million managerial concerns that arise with what I'm saying. I totally get that. But you understand what I'm saying?
I do, and I think I'd like to add a little an ingredient to this recipe. Not Fortnite, but Epic has taken the stance that it will stop chasing exclusives on the Epic Game Store when Steam is more fair with the amount of money it shares with developers. We all heard that, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up. I have something.
So on the surface, because you may rip this apart, but on the surface, it's like, oh, well, that's noble. And then it's like, but we're grinding our people into dust. Right? And I think that if you're going to take a moral stance of like Steam's being bad, you probably can't grind your people into dust. And if you're making billions of dollars, which I'm sure it is billions of dollars on Fortnite, and your investors are like, well, you are making billions of dollars, but you were 0.1% off expected growth, so we have to fire 500 people or some crap like that. And we've seen that in the past in different studios. I'm not saying Epic will do that, but I agree with Joe wholeheartedly. If you're going to be a good company, be a good company. Don't pick and choose it. Don't do it publicly to like shame Steam, and then behind closed doors just be like every other studio that we've heard of in the last month.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I find and I had forgotten about that statement by this Epic Games CEO, Tim Sweeney, about, if Steam committed to a permanent 88% revenue share without major strings attached, then Epic would stop, looking for exclusives and also put their own games back on Steam. Now, I'm totally fair to say that we won't put our games on Steam until the revenue sharing is more fair. That's totally fine. And I think it should be up to developers as well to say, you know what, I would rather put my game on the Epic Store because I get a better cut than Steam. And Steam takes a large, I think it's 30%, which is significant.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I found that whole statement to be a little bit patronizing and condescending. It's kind of like, I'm going to stop trying to steal these things unless you become a better company. Meanwhile, sure, I don't know if Epic Games is any worse than Valve or better. Like, it's probably impossible to even draw those comparisons, but
none of them are good. Like, it's all, at the end of the day, these decisions are made by people in suits who aren't universally hardcore gamers and they look at too many spreadsheets. They're not made by passionate, developers are not the problem and the developers' bosses are not the problem. It goes way up the ladder, and these companies all have to report to an overlord that needs a certain profit margin, and that's what drives everything. I did hear an alternative, though. This came from Raf, and I'm going to butcher his last name, Van Leroy Lop. Anyways, the creator of The Long Dark and leader of Hinterland, and somebody was asking him about Epic Games Store, and he's like, yeah, but if you're going to, as an indie developer, if you're going to have a larger audience on Steam, which at the time Steam had a larger audience, I don't know if that's still the case, then you might get more revenue per buy from Epic, but you're going to get less exposure. So there's that to consider as well. Like, Steam has a built-in, user base that is significant. So, and that we may see that dwindle and evaporate completely, but I don't know how many people are on the Epic Games Store, but I would be willing to bet that a sizable amount of them never look at another game and they just click on Fortnite every time they open it.
Oh, absolutely. That's the only reason that there is an Epic Games Store, is because of Fortnite.
Yeah. I agree.
But and I'm all for choices. I don't personally have a problem. Like, I know there's been a lot of discussion about, there's too many game stores now. I got to deal with this and that, and Steam and Epic Games and Origin and Uplay. Me personally, it doesn't really bother me. I'm not a fan of exclusives though, and I mean on PC. I'm okay with console exclusives. I get that. I feel like there's more to it than that. But I think it should just be up to the developer. I'm not a big fan of buying for exclusivity or paying for it, right?
Sure.
So, but in any case, I don't know, Joe, do you got any closing thoughts on that? They did specifically point out, I know you and I are very much looking forward to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Respawn did specifically point out that they're entirely different teams working on Apex Legends and Star Wars, which always boggles my mind that sometimes people don't understand that. They're like, you released a new skin for Apex Legends, but what about Star Wars? I'm like, no, that's different teams, different things.
Sure.
Any thoughts on?
I mean, my thoughts begin and end with the content creators, much the way I feel about, Apple Music versus Spotify. If Taylor Swift wants to put her album out on Tidal or Spotify only because that's the best paycheck for her, who am I to say? Like, if I was in her position, I suppose I would be trying to build up my bank account the best way I could too. So if that's a developer's choice to use Epic to better their financial stability at their studio, so be it. But I agree that when it turns into the Netflix versus Hulu rat race of like, I'm going to outbid you for the Friends rights, Hulu, it's business. I mean, it's hard for me to have an opinion on it. That's just the way of the world. That's capitalism. But that does suck because then you do start hurting the consumer. So, yeah, obviously I'm not a huge fan of that.
All right, and now I want to talk real quickly about an Audible book for this week that I looked up, and I wanted it to be topical to what we talk about here at Push to Talk, and also timely to what's going on outside of this recording studio and outside of the gaming world. So the one suggestion I have is if you're going to go try out Audible, first of all, you should go to audibletrial.com/push-to-talk. We're sponsored by them now. And a great recommendation for your first free audiobook is Marvel's Avengers Endgame, The Pirate Angel, The Talking Tree, and Captain Rabbit. Now, that's a mouthful. The book itself is rather short. It precedes the events of Avengers Endgame, which, of course, has hit theaters a couple days ago, and we won't talk about it because people are literally getting beaten up for spoilers. That's a different story. I don't know why I mentioned that here, but the point is, it's narrated by Nolan North, which we all know from various video games, including Destiny 2 and lots of other ones. So you can check that out. We'll have a link in the show notes to that. And remember, if you go to audibletrial.com/push-to-talk, you get 1 month free.
Nice.
Okay, let's talk about what we played this past week. Joe, you want to start us off?
I do, but I first want to begin with a new segment for Push to Talk called Corrections.
Oh, nice. We don't make mistakes.
No, I made a mistake early in the episode. Everything I said holds true for Persona 5, except Persona 5 The Royal is the name of the expanded Persona 5 game, which is coming to PS4. The thing that I was harping on is called Persona 5 Scramble, hence the S. So that's what I got wrong. My fault.
Or at least the S had some relevance.
It did have
wasn't
relevance.
Complete.
It did have relevance, yes.
Okay.
Anyway, moving on. What did I play? I played Katana Zero, which I touched on last week. It is the Devolver Digital action platformer, one hit kills you ninja game, I guess you'd describe it. And I got to the finish line there, and I would say that it is $15 well spent. It was really good. It's a little bit overly vulgar, not from like I'm not shy of the words. I just felt like it was heavy-handed in its delivery of the dialogue, especially for a pixel art game. It just kind of read kind of weird. Otherwise, I thought the action, the gameplay was really, really well done and a very good bargain and a very unique game. So I do recommend it, and maybe I'll even check it out again in the next couple months because it was short enough that you could do that, which is these days a plus in my book.
I was just going to ask you how long it was because I've looked it up on Steam. It's out on. Is it out on obviously on PC on Steam? Is it out on? Would you play it on Switch?
It's on, yeah, I played on Switch. Yep.
Yeah, and it's got really, really good reviews on Steam.
Deservingly. Yeah, yeah. I thought it was excellent. It was probably 7 hours, absolute max, something like that. 6 or 7.
You know what? That's a good amount, though. I long for the I want a game that I can finish in like single digit hours.
Sure, that's the one. That's the one. And then I picked up the new Box Boy game, also on Switch, which is a HAL Laboratory, the people behind Kirby, kind of puzzle game. It is, you may have seen it. It was a 3DS franchise up until now. It's black and white pretty much exclusively. And the idea is you're this square guy with legs walking around and you're fitting yourself into these little crevices and navigating these very jagged mazes and platforming on top of that, solving puzzles kind of thing. On the topic of short and digestible, this is the epitome of that. It is, I haven't gotten to the end yet, so I couldn't tell you how long the game is total, but each level is like 3 minutes or something like that. It's really good for pick up and play, and it's really, really well done. I love the 3DS games, and this is no different. This is excellent.
Yeah, 3 minutes is great, especially for a game that you're going to take on the go.
Yep. It's I don't know if they do that on purpose. Like, it's really just like the soul of Box Boy is that sort of pace. But on top of that, it is perfect for the Switch, which is great. So that's all I've been playing.
What about you, Bill? I think you and I might be playing some of the same games this week, but start with you.
Yeah, we are, as always. So obviously I put in my time with Destiny 2. There's nothing to add to that. There's, maybe 5-10 hours of that. And I did play some Hitman 2. I had never actually finished the Hitman 2 campaign. So I just beat the final mission of that. And I kind of going back through it and picking up some challenges and unlocking some items and looking at new content that's coming and trying to keep an eye on elusive targets. So that's my Hitman 2. I did play a little bit of The Sims 4 again, still. Nice. Not much, but a little bit. Primarily, though, and I leave this till last because I'm not going to talk about it because I never want to talk about a game until I've published my review. So even though I've written my review for this game, I have not published it yet, so I don't want to do that. Even though it should be published before the episode comes out, I still think, just in case, something happens or whatever, I don't want to. But I've been playing a lot of Days Gone, like a lot of Days Gone. And I was even in the last time we had, we recorded an episode, but I was under embargo and couldn't talk about that, of course. So yeah, I don't even know how many hours because the PlayStation doesn't really let you track that. But I would probably say in the 40, 50 hours, maybe more of Days Gone. And I will probably be playing more of that this week. And then I will have more complete thoughts after my review is published and I, feel like I can speak to that.
Cool. I have so many questions for you.
I have many answers in a week.
Yep. Perfect.
I've also been playing a little bit of Days Gone. I started playing it on Friday, so I don't have nearly the amount of hours in it as you do. But so far, so good. It's an interesting kind of game. I mean, it's obviously one of those PS4 exclusives that's always highly touted, and it's one of the reasons that I originally chose the PS4 over the Xbox One. Like when it was time to upgrade, aside from the fact that you were playing Destiny 1 at the time on the PS4, and I needed it for that. But I've always been I've always preferred the exclusive games that Sony comes out with over the ones that Microsoft comes out with. Just the way that they happen, whether it's Uncharted or Last of Us. There's some really, really good PS4 exclusives, and Days Gone has a lot to live up to. There's a lot of comparisons to previous titles. It's a zombie type survival open world ish story based game, and I'm probably about 6 to 7 hours into it so far, and it's not bad. It looks pretty good. It's a little bit early for me to tell whether or not the story holds up to some of the other games. I have a feeling it may not be quite as highly. Well, it's definitely not a Last of Us, but it's fun enough. I'm having fun with it. It's enjoyable.
Cool.
I think it'll lead us to a good conversation next week because, number one, you'll be able to talk more as you play more. Because I think there's a conversation here. And the one thing I will say is that without giving anything away or getting into deep discussion, it's obviously judged against its, PS4 exclusive counterparts, right? It is just the way it is. And that's
Which
a
may
natural
not
thing.
be fair, but it is, yeah.
That's the discussion, right? Yeah. Of course, is it fair, or and it's not even if it's fair, but what are you missing out on if you do that? Because you might miss out on something. So, but yeah, next week I will be fully loaded and ready to talk about Days Gone, and because I probably won't have to play nearly as much of it in the coming week, I'm hoping, and I'm not sure what yet, but my goal is to find one of those bite-sized experiences and have like a new game to talk about that I've maybe never tried before.
Well, I'm hoping to get started on a game I've never tried before, but it's definitely not bite-sized. As you recall from last episode, Joe, you're sending me Zelda, Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and as far as I can tell from the track information, it has now reached Canada.
Nice.
So that means it will be here somewhere between 1 and 85 days from now. And depending on how the postal service works out. So I might have a chance to load it up sometime before the next episode. But yeah, that's definitely not bite-sized. I don't know. I mean, I almost wish, maybe we'll ask this on our hashtag push-to-talk segment on Twitter as to what folks' recommendations are for bite-sized sub-10-hour games.
Ooh, that could be quite a list.
Joe has like 94 games that just flooded into his head right now, and I have 0.
I do. I got a few good ones. So that's not a bad question for me, but whatever you guys want to do.
It's a struggle for me to just think about it. So yeah, we'll table that for next episode, and we'll reach out on social media and see what if we can get some input, and maybe we'll all think about it a little bit as well. It's tough, but I really wish there was more of those, and maybe there is. Maybe I'm just not aware of it.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, that's the thing. I know that I'm in the dark here. You're with me. We're just standing next to each other.
So, Joe, do you have any specific plans for games for this coming week? Anything new and exciting on the horizon?
Yeah. I want to go back to Hitman, which we discussed, and I was trying to get through Katana Zero to kind of make room in my mind for it. And then, of course, I dove into Box Boy just because it happened to release the same day I finished Katana Zero. But yeah, I think it's time to revisit Hitman as per our discussion last week. What about you?
Well, I mean, now I'll be, like I just said, I'll be doing some Days Gone. I'm hoping that Bungie will fix some of the Destiny 2 stuff so I can complete that. Gotta get my daily punishment in. Or weekly punishment. It's not a daily thing anymore. Thank God I've matured away from that for now. What about you, Bill? You mentioned, a little bit of Days Gone, but is there anything else new coming out? Do you have any interest in Mortal Kombat 11 at all, either of you? Like, we haven't really talked about it, but it also came out this past week.
Yeah, not for me.
No.
Not for me.
No.
I do
Just
not.
a flat out
no.
nope. That's 3 no's. You're out.
It's not Mortal Kombat's fault.
And that's a thing though, because in Mortal Kombat 10 or X or whatever you want to call it, I was like, I fell into that that hype, right? I fell into the Kojima-ness of everybody's like Mortal Kombat 10, and I'm like, oh wow, I have to buy that. I have to play this. It's a good game, and I bought it, and I was like, I hate this. Like, it's probably a fantastic game, but it's not my kind, and I learned my lesson, and when 11 came around, it's like, yeah, no, not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at those.
And that seems to be mostly the consensus from our listeners as well, because when we asked last week how they get hyped for new releases, 70% said they don't. I'm just naturally grumpy. So
well, they know us, so that's the problem.
Maybe.
We need a more diverse. We need some Joe audience in here. People that aren't bitter.
I feel like Joe's not bitter, but Joe's also not one to get overly hyped too easily. That's my sense.
I'm not a spaz.
Right. So yeah, so Mortal Kombat's not really our thing, but it sure is getting a lot of attention as well because it's one of those big, legendary titles that's been around forever, and I think rightfully so. I'm actually kind of happy to see some of these franchises still going.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice. I'm showing my age, but it's kind of like, this is so cool. I remember playing Mortal Kombat 2 or whatever.
It is nice.
So.
Yeah, I agree. It is. Me not liking something doesn't mean that I don't wish it success, of course, and I know that that should go without saying. But I hope that any game released theoretically, unless there's something horrible behind it, does well. But yeah, Not my cup of tea at all.
All right, Joe, you have any closing words for us before we end this week's episode?
Closing words.
Words of wisdom.
I hope Canada pulls through and sets you up for success in the land of Hyrule.
I hope I have enough time.
Yeah.
That's my only hope.
Spoiler alert, you don't.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But yeah, we need to find a better balance for that, and that's both of us. I'm still very envious of Joe and the amount of games he gets to play because he makes better decisions than we do, clearly.
I think we all sound like I might even play the fewest hours per week is my read on the three of us, but I just spread it out different.
I'm probably, and I would say anywhere from 3 to 5 a day.
Okay.
Right? So
A lot of that is your work, though. So
nah, not really.
No.
I'm like, I mean, yes, with Days Gone, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. But when I'm playing Days Gone, I was playing it like 6-7 hours a day, and then trying to balance that with other duties and whatnot. So, but I would say like on an average day, once I'm done work, I don't know what I do. Like I'll go watch, Game of Thrones is coming up in a few minutes, right? So we got to get the hell out of here. But other than that, like I'll come back tonight and play again. So that's the life of somebody whose spine is a pool noodle.
Well, I guess in closing then, I should say that our listeners are lucky that we managed to squeeze in the time to record this podcast, and we are lucky to have listeners who are listening to us blabber on about what we're passionate about. You can catch new episodes every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time at pushtotalk.fm or iTunes or any podcast client that you prefer. And you can also follow us on Twitter at pushtotalkfm, and we will hopefully have you listen to us again next week. Thanks so much for tuning in.